All right, Rich, you got to mute yourself next time you do that.
Oh, proof of life, you know? Anyway. Okay.
All right, Chair, we are good to go.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the October 28th, 2020 Design Commissioner Regular Video Meeting. My name is Rich Irwin and I am the Design Commission Chair. In accordance with Proclamation 20-28.11 and the Governor's Extended Safe Start Order, tonight's Design Commission meeting is using video conferencing technology provided by Zoom. The Zoom video of this meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom and will be uploaded to the city's YouTube channel. CPD Director Jeff Thompson, Deputy CPD Director Allison Van Gorp, and several other staff members are participating in tonight's meeting remotely. Other public audience members are listening to the meeting by telephone or via the internet. Welcome to all, and thank you for joining us this evening. Commissioners, please ensure that your microphones are turned on for the roll call. Chair Irwin is present. Vice Chair Brandt?
Present.
Commissioner Grambaugh?
Here.
Commissioner McPherson?
You're muted.
Commissioner McPherson. There we go. Commissioner Perez?
Here.
Commissioner Soprano?
Here.
Commissioner Czar?
Present.
Thank you. Before we start the business of tonight's meeting, I want to suggest a few rules to help the meeting run smoothly. If the commissioner has a question, please use the raise hand feature. I will do my best to recognize commissioners in the order in which hands are raised. Everyone will be asked to limit himself or herself to one question and to one clarifying question if necessary, so that each board member has a chance to ask a question before a board member is given another chance to ask a question. Are those instructions clear? Okay, thank you. The first item of business this evening is to review and consider approving the September 23rd, 2020 minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of this previous, well, excuse me, one question. You've got two dates listed for minutes. Do we have two sets of minutes to review?
That was a typo, Chair. We have
That's
the
fine.
minutes from July 8th.
That's fine, no worries. If people would please have a look at the September 23rd minutes, I will consider a motion to approve the minutes after review.
I move to approve.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have anybody who wishes to make a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Those in favor of approving the minutes of the September 23rd, 2020 meeting, let's test raising
Excuse me, Chair.
our hand. Yes.
Due to Zoom, we need to do a roll call vote for all votes.
Oh, sorry.
So that I
All
can
right.
capture them all. I can do the roll call vote if you'd like, or you can.
No,
do
that's
the roll
fine.
call.
Vice Chair Brandt?
I approve.
Commissioner Grambaugh?
Abstain.
Commissioner McPherson?
Approve.
Commissioner Perez?
Approved.
Commissioner Soprano?
Approve.
Commissioner Czar?
You're muted.
Yeah. Commissioner Czar?
It looks like she's no longer on. I don't see her phone number anymore.
Okay.
Video's on though.
Commissioner-
There.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Yes.
Okay, approved.
Thank you. Commissioner Irwin also approves. Motion passes. Let's see. Okay. Tonight's agenda will not include in-person public appearances in accordance with Proclamation 20-28.11 and the Governor's Extended Safe Start Order. However, individuals wishing to speak live during the appearances portion of our meeting may do so by telephone or using the Zoom teleconferencing application, provided, however, they registered their desire to speak with the Senior Administrator by 4 p.m. today. Our Senior Administrator will call on you by name or telephone number when it is your turn to speak. This is the opportunity for anyone to speak to the Design Commission on any item. All remarks will be addressed to the Commission as a whole and not to individual Commission members or staff members. If any person makes personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, or who becomes boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the Commission, I will request that that person leave the meeting. When it is your turn to address the Commission, be sure to speak audibly and state your name for the record. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. The senior administrator will provide you with a 30-second and a 15-second warning when your time is about to expire. Senior administrator, is there anyone who has signed up for appearances that wishes to address the commission?
Thank you, Chair. We did not have anyone register to speak in appearances.
Okay. Then we will move on to the next agenda item. The next agenda item of the evening is DSR 19-007, Public Hearing, King County Pump Station. The public hearing is for the purpose of rehabilitation of the existing regional wastewater pump station, including the addition of generator building and improvements to site access. Individuals wishing to make a public comment on this agenda item may do so by telephone or by using the Zoom teleconferencing application. Provided, however, they registered their desire to make a public comment with the senior administrator by 4 p.m. today. Our senior administrator will call on you by name or telephone number when it is your turn to speak. This public hearing is now open as of 7:09 p.m. Pacific time. Those wishing to provide public testimony, please speak audibly, state your name for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. A 15-second warning will be provided when your time is about to expire. Senior Administrator, is there anyone who has signed up for public comment that wishes to address the commission?
Yes, Chair. We had one member of the public, David Shelton, that wishes to provide comment to the commission.
Okay.
David, you just need to unmute yourself. Looks like you got your camera on.
Okay. Would you like me to speak now?
Yes, please.
Oh, first of all, I wanted to compliment both the Mercer Island staff and the county staff for their consideration during this process. The county staff and their design people met with us on several occasions and accommodated many of our requests. And the documents seem to reflect most of what we have agreed upon. I'm really attending only because at the end of the commission's presentation, the presentation to the commission, there are the discussion items, and one is proposed approach for screening along western property line in response to neighbors' comments. And so I was curious as to what that note was about and what would be addressed in that regard. Our property's at 7627 Southeast 22nd Street, and we adjoin the entire east-west boundary of the county's pump station property. So this project is of a lot of concern to us. It's an industrial facility that'll be expanded to within a few feet of our property line. And so my real reason for attending is just to understand what that discussion note meant. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Chair, that was our only person who had registered to speak in the public hearing.
Okay. If there is no further testimony, the public portion of this hearing is now closed as of 7:12 p.m. Pacific time. The second item of business is a review and decision for DSR 19-007, public hearing, King County Pump Station. Senior Planner Robin, I'm going to mangle this, sorry, Probsting, will provide a brief presentation of the project.
Thank you, Chair. So good evening, Design Commissioners. My name is Robin Probsting. I'm your Senior Planner. I did prepare a brief presentation describing the project's compliance with the city's code, but first King County has prepared a presentation sort of introducing the project and explaining the scope. So before I dive into code issues, I'd like to turn things over to King County's team to introduce the project. So I'll let James let you share your screen and have at it.
I think, Robin, I think Meredith was going to start the presentation for us, and we'll have various presenters after Meredith. And this is James Che, the consultant team project engineer for this project.
I'm muted. I'm Meredith Redmond. I am the King County Project Manager for the North Mercer Island Interceptor and Enitai Interceptor Upgrades Project. So, next slide, please. Our agenda. So I will be giving you a project overview, and Andy Court and Lorcan French will be discussing the existing site and the proposed improvements. Next slide. So the project service area encompasses North Mercer Island, a portion of Southeast Bellevue, and the town of Beaux Arts, the gray highlighted areas. Next slide. So what are we building? This project increases the reliability and the capacity of the North Mercer and Enitai interceptors, and to convey 20-year peak flows projected through 2060. So I'll start with the conveyance portion of the project first at the King County's North Mercer pump station. So construction will include approximately 17,000 linear feet of new sewer pipeline following a mostly upland alignment along the I-90 trail to Lake Washington, where we will cross the East Channel from North Mercer Island to Enitai Beach Park in Bellevue. From Enitai Beach Park in Bellevue, the new sewer pipeline will be installed using horizontal directional drilling technology under the Enitai hillside to the Swaylock pump station. So we will also be rehabilitating the existing Enitai interceptor from Enitai Beach Park through the Mercer Slough and up to our Swaylock pump station. Some other, we will be modifying City of Mercer Island local sewer lines to connect to our new sewer pipeline as part of this project. And then I think that wraps up conveyance. And then we will be upgrading our North Mercer pump station, as well as the City of Mercer Island's lift station 11. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So we will be wrapping up final design first quarter 2021, and we are going to be advertising for construction in, say, spring 2021. And we anticipate having our contractors on board by fall of 2021, with construction running through 2025 into 2026. Okay, next slide. Site zoning. So King County has completed the lot consolidation process with the City of Mercer Island for our North Mercer pump station property. And I think that concludes the project overview. And so Andy, I will turn it over to you.
Hey, this is Lorcan. I might just jump in here. No problem. So now zooming in a little bit, we have an aerial here on the left showing our site located off of the 22nd Street. And then if you click that again, I think we have some animation here. This is zooming in even closer to the street view now, and you can see that blue arrow pointing to the driveway entrance into our parcel. You can see it's very wooded in that area and slightly more overgrown than other driveway entries, presence of some weeds and English ivy. Next slide, please, James. This is another view now looking up the driveway at the pump station. And again, I want to emphasize both the very robust forested character and then pointing out understory that is slightly less desirable. And if the next slide, please, we can get a better view of that. This is within the stream buffer that runs through the site, north-south through the site. You can see it's thick with English ivy, some Japanese knotweed, and you have, though, a healthy overstory of mixed conifer hardwood native trees. This site offers a lot of opportunity for restoration, and we'll touch on that later on when we discuss the planting and restoration plan. Next slide, please. I think that's it for me then.
Yes, it's over to me now. This is Andy Court from Jacobs. I'm the architectural lead for the project. So this is obviously going to be a refresher for most, but just to kind of cover what's going on with the site. We have the area that's kind of shaded in that kind of salmon pink color on the screen here is the footprint of the existing pump station and the kind of paved surfaces on the site. So what we're doing here is effectively improving the access into the site for vehicles getting in and out. When they do need to get in, with the hammerhead turning arrangement in there, with some parking in there as well to keep the streets clear as best as possible. The new building itself is kind of shown down there in the bottom right corner. We've kind of tucked that into the site, into the ground as best as possible, and keep the floor level something like similar, because we are tying utilities between the two buildings. So the approach we're taking is to kind of minimize the impact, minimize the height above ground as much as possible with that building, and sloping everything back into the site as well, to minimize the encroachment onto that landscape buffer area, which obviously Mr. Sheldon was mentioning there. Down the western side, which runs left to right at the bottom of the screen that we're seeing here. We've also shown the service yard area. There's pieces of equipment out there. There's a fence line that runs around there which screens that equipment. And similarly across the retaining wall as well. There's the same decorative fence along that retaining wall line there, which we'll get onto later, but it'll show you it kind of blocks the equipment from view. And also provides like glancing views through the fence line as well, by the use of the vertical slats for the fence type. And we're showing as well the temporary pump station. So there's a few temporary bits of equipment there, which we're just showing for reference really, just to make sure there's no surprises. There's a few pieces of equipment that'll be above ground in that area to facilitate the construction work. So when construction is complete, all that will be taken out and it will be kind of landscaped back into that area again. So next slide, please. So here's a perspective view. The colors for the kind of roof material and stuff we'll get onto in a minute, but this gives you an idea of the overall geometry of the new building, the service yard area, and how those retaining walls with the decorative fence run into the geometry of the building as well. And you can see there's a few pieces of equipment in the service yard area, which running that fence line through there just helps to screen that from view along the main street with the public frontage. And we go to the next slide. So this just shows really the kind of levels that we're looking at here. So we've effectively cut in. You can see where the existing line of existing grade is shown on here. We've cut that in, put a retaining wall along the western boundary there. And then we've sloped the roof into the site, just so we don't have a load of rainwater pipe work, storm pipe work in the buffer area. Everything's into the site, and that means we can maximize that landscape buffer off to the western boundary, because you see the property line there. It's a tapering wedge down on that side. There's a removal of existing chimney on the existing pump station, and what we sought to achieve was this flowing ridge line for the roof. So the existing pump station roof will flow into the new generator building roof, which then wraps down and turns vertical on the retaining wall. Next slide, please. So here's a few materials, just to give you an idea of the type of material palette that we're looking to use here. So we're looking to limit the amount of materials that we're using and just having a robust select palette. So we're using bricks that will match the existing pump station. We're actually reclaiming some of the existing bricks to kind of fill in existing openings. And then we found a pretty good brick match for the new building as well, which is available locally. There's a few images here for the standing seam roof, the metal roof. So it'll be a nice low maintenance hard-wearing roof going on the new building. The 8-4 sample up there is the recovering for the existing pump station roof. So you'll notice it's a kind of browny earthy tone. And that browny earthy tone is a kind of theme that we're using for all materials on this new building. So they'll be matching in with the earth tones from the existing building, existing recovered roofs and new roofs and metal siding, all in the same kind of color. So it ties the new building into the existing and also helps it blend into the site with the landscaping as well. And there's a couple of images on here as well in the top right corner for skylights. So we're working through those at the minute with the specifications for those. So there's a couple of different types here. There's a flat skylight that would sit flush, almost flush with the roof. It will stand up by maybe 6 inches from the roof line. And there's another one just up above there, which is a slightly different type, which is more robust for fall protection as well. There's a couple of images as well for the concrete walls just there. So we're looking to use like a board form effect. So it'll be a pretty flush, smooth board, but you will get those kind of ribs running through the concrete where the boards are kind of pulled off. So that will give it a bit more of a kind of natural feel rather than it being just flush, smooth concrete. And again, just help it sit nicely into the environment. And the image down the bottom there is a similar fence actually to what we're proposing here. So we'll get onto that in a second. So go to the next slide. So these are just some of the examples of the materials, the kind of palettes that we see through and matching up, similar tones of material, similar earth tones for the facility. So we have the existing brick, we've got the pump station, replacement roof covering on the left there, and then typical color palette from metal roof and wall siding panel manufacturers. So we'll be selecting those just to kind of get a nice holistic palette of materials that's really dialed in for what we're trying to achieve with blending into the environment there. Next slide, please. So this is just real quick, just to show highlight the fence lines that we have. The blue one, the blue fence line is just a standard like weld mesh panel fence, which will be coated, will be plastic coated, again to kind of match in with the environment. It's out of sight, no one's really going to see it out around the back there. And the areas that we will see are the ones in red. So we have the service yard fence here, which James is highlighting now. This is the vertical bar decorative fence. And then along the retaining wall as well, we have a stepped fence line across the top of that retaining wall. If you go to the next slide. So this just really illustrates what you will see looking at these. So this is directly out of our 3D model. This is basically what's in our drawings and what we're showing you this evening. So the image on the left there is the decorative fence that we're showing in red. The one on the right is a typical fence which we're showing in blue, which is around the back of the pump station. So I mentioned before the spacing and the orientation of the vertical bars on the decorative fence, the red fence, is kind of worked out to mask anything behind there. So regular view, just kind of screening out all of the equipment, but still allowing some kind of passive surveillance on the site. So you can, as you drive past, you walk past the site, you will get those glancing views through the fence to see is anyone there that shouldn't be there, or just make sure nothing untoward is going on. If you go to the next slide. This is our handoff point back to Lorcan again. This is the kind of main render of the site entrance, showing the building and the equipment screen wall at the front there with the address signage onto it, and the landscaping. So I'll hand it off to Lorcan.
Okay, thanks a lot, Andy. So yeah, this rendering, as Andy mentioned, is taken from the driveway entrance from the 22nd Street, and it shows the building within the context of the proposed landscaping. I think it works well to illustrate how the buildings are scaled to blend with the residential character of the neighborhood. And it doesn't really dominate the site at all, but rather it works very well with the landscape and the building built elements to complement each other in that character. And the goal is helped a lot by the existing and preserving these large native trees that really helps sort of take down that scale, and it helps really blend with the forested character of the neighborhood. Before moving on, just to point out to the left of the driveway, we have that sort of more restoration, naturalistic riparian buffer that we intend to restore back to a healthy forest condition. And to the right side of the driveway, we have the area that's sort of fronting onto 22nd Street and intending to be manicured, more tidy in character. Yeah, a little bit more ornamental, low growing, and simple structured. So next slide, please, James. This rendering depicts the view from the driveway of the property to the west, looking east into the pump station property, and illustrates that our intent for that dense evergreen screen that will be used to effectively block the view of the new generator building and the other built improvements on that west side, really from day one. And this full screening will be achieved both by the close spacing of those trees and the large size of those conifers that will be planted at the time of installation. Next slide, please, James. And I'd also like to share with you our tree removal, tree protection exhibit. This dashed line depicts indicates the construction limits. And unfortunately, most of the trees within this limits will need to be removed as indicated with those red X's. We do manage to save one or two of them. Really we're looking to minimize though the impacts to that stream and native riparian zone outside of the dashed line and maximizing tree protection within that riparian buffer. And I want to point to the diagonal hatching that denotes selective clearing. I talked earlier about the thick and dense weedy invasive understory. Well, that selective clearing preserves the native trees, but allows us effectively to come in there and restore all the way to the property boundary to really get the best ecological lift from the site. I think the next slide, please. That's illustrative landscape plan really shows how we are able to do the selective clearing beyond the construction limits and take that to the property line. And I wanted to point out here, so yeah, again, north is to the left. So the east side of the driveway, we have the stream riparian. It's that more naturalistic configuration where we're using a native tree and shrub plant palette to really sort of do a full restoration within our property boundaries. The other parts I'd like to point out to the, right on the west street frontage where James's cursor is, we have there this sort of more welcoming frontage onto the street. It also allows for clear sight lines into the interior of the site and yard. And the last piece is just that western boundary on top of the retaining wall, providing that robust evergreen screen. Next slide, please, James. This is just sort of showing the four categories of how the site's sort of organized. We have in the upper left the blue native riparian restoration. It's shaded blue on the diagram. And we have the orange native interplanting. This is where it's outside of the clearing limits and we're doing that selective clearing to restore the understory. And below on the west edge, we have the evergreen screen where we're establishing that large conifer buffer to screen from day one. And then finally that street frontage that really opens up onto 22nd Street. And the next slide is a plants material board. We just list the plants by their symbol, and the plants shows the plant selection used on the design, and it gives some representative images to give you a sense of the character, the form, the look and feel for the different plants selected. And finally, James, the last slide, we have a diagram showing the site lighting. And I want to point out the the three different lights being proposed. We have the yard light on the left, which line the driveway. We have the building mounted lights in the middle there, and those go around the pump station and generator building. And lastly, we have these two small uplighting lights that are located in front of that wall, entrance wall, and provides a little bit of uplighting to make that visual sign. And the last thing to point out, that red outline is the limits of the visible light. So this conveys that the foot candles are kept within the property boundary and won't spill out beyond that property boundary. And I believe, James, that concludes our hopefully short presentation to give you reacquainted with this project.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Commissioners, do we have any questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Chair, I believe Robin might have a brief staff presentation as well.
Okay.
If there are any clarifying questions, I guess I'll let the commission decide. If you have clarifying questions about what you just saw, I think it's fine to ask those now, but I do also have a presentation. So I guess I'll leave it to you to decide if you want to consolidate your questions to the end or if there are some questions you want to ask now.
Go ahead and wait on my questions until after your presentation, Robin.
Okay, very good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do the same.
Commissioner Grandbois, can you wait until after, or do you wish to speak now?
I can wait.
Okay, thank you. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I will share my screen here. Is the PowerPoint showing up in full here? Oh, pardon me. Is that up here? Is that?
Yeah,
yes.
good, Robin.
Excellent. Thank you. Excellent. So I have just a brief presentation on the project's compliance with code. King County's team did an excellent job of describing the scope, so I won't retread that ground. I'll just do a high-level overview of a few points from the staff report showing how proposed design meets code and the reasoning behind staff recommendation of approval. And as a friendly reminder, we haven't had a meeting for a while, so I'll just remind everyone that the role of the Design Commission at this meeting is to determine whether the city's code is met, in contrast to for example, to the study session that we had most recently, where more general feedback was being sought. In this case, this is a hearing for design review approval, which is a land use approval that confirms the city's design standards are met. So just as a refresher, it's been a while since we've met. It's not a studio critique. We're just looking at code compliance. So first, for context, the pump station site is located in a residential zone, meaning that Chapter 1912 of the city's code applies, which is the chapter with design standards that apply when a project is outside of the town center zone. Pump station is existing, and I just grabbed a screenshot from Google Maps. It's tucked away from the street, and again, what you see is the existing pump station, and the generator building will go just to the right of that. The applicant did have a study session with the Design Commission last year, at which the commission offered feedback and which the applicant has incorporated into their revised design. So again, it's Mercer Island Code 1912 that applies in this case. And that chapter is organized by topic, with each topic having stated objectives, which read like principles or purpose statements, followed by specific standards. Sorry, my cat always comes in at the worst time. So the code also states that where a code standard says a standard should be met, the specific standard is mandatory unless the applicant can demonstrate an equal or better means of satisfying that standard and the objectives of that section. So otherwise, if a standard says shall be met, then that standard is just mandatory. So there are a few areas where the should statement or the should route was taken, for example, around standards related to outdoor covered gathering spaces, which are kind of an awkward fit for a utility building. So as described in the staff report, the proposed design meets all of the applicable design standards for this type of building. And I've just summarized a few key topics here. First, the code requires the building to be proportional in scale to adjacent buildings and to not present visual mass or bulk impacts that are out of proportion with adjacent buildings, or to propose a design that appears from the public right-of-way or surrounding properties as having unmodulated visual bulk. And the new generator building, as well as the existing pump station, are similar in size to adjacent buildings, which in this neighborhood are single-family homes. As shown on table, there's the table on page 5 of the staff report. The two buildings together actually present a comparable visual mass to the adjacent buildings, and both buildings are somewhat under the height limit allowed by zone, so that further limits the visual impact of the building frontage. Second, materials are required by code to be high quality and durable. They should be used with consistency on all sides of a building, and they should highlight architectural elements such as doors and windows. The proposed design achieves this by having durable materials like brick, patterned board form concrete, and metal. There's a roofing and then a louvered metal proposed for the building. And these are materials that do not degrade easily. They have a long lifespan, and a similar material palette is used for the generator building as on the existing pump station site. So that creates a consistent, similar look and feel. The proposed materials are used on all sides of the proposed generator building as called for by code. And lastly, the materials are used in a way that highlight architectural elements of the building. So doors, roofing, it breaks up the facade so that there are not those large unmodulated blank walls. The last item is screening. Screening is a requirement of code. In this case, when a utility use is next to a residential use, 20 feet of screening is required. This is another case though where it's a should statement, meaning that if the objectives of the code are met with an equal or better alternative to the standard, the alternative is an acceptable way of meeting the code. So in this case, the 20-foot standard is comfortably met on the east and south sides, which are on the top and the right here. But there's kind of a pinch point on this western edge. And this is in part because of the siting of the, well, due to the siting of the turnaround in the new generator building. The site has a water course on it, which is this blue streak up at the top. And the proposed generator building and turnaround are sited to be as far away from the water course as possible, which is exactly what the city's critical area code requires. It directs development to avoid impacts to critical areas and generally be sited as far away as possible from critical areas. So to meet the screening standard, there's both that decorative fence described earlier proposed together with a dense line of coniferous trees. So together, those measures would create a robust screening, not completely opaque. It still would perhaps, it's not a solid wall. It avoids that compound effect, but together provide effective screening and satisfy the city's code standard for screening. So just pause there to see if there's any questions so far on anything discussed. Can I speak to anything or clarify anything I've covered so far?
Robin, I do have one question, if that's all right.
Yes, absolutely.
Looking at this screen right here, in the that first section of retaining wall and plantings from the street, as you head kind of down the neighbor's driveway, the survey shows that there's a sanitary sewer on the neighbor's property, basically between their driveway and the property line. And I'm wondering if that's getting moved or is it staying? And if so, how does that affect the size of the planting along that property line, right? Because the code obviously says you can't plant a tree within 8 feet of a sanitary sewer. And I'm seeing, I'm curious about that. I'm assuming that includes sanitary sewers that are off the property. the subject property? Or does it not? That I guess is my question.
I know some sewer lines are proposed to be relocated as part of this whole redo of the site. And there's a condition of approval requiring trees to be at least 8 feet from utility lines as required by code.
Okay, so I guess my question to you then, just as a code related item, that 8 feet transfers, or crosses property lines, right? If the sanitary sewer line is on the neighbor's property, but within 2 feet or a foot of the property line, that 8 foot mark, moves with the sanitary sewer. It doesn't end at the property line. I'm not making myself very clear, but
you absolutely are. It doesn't, and I'm chewing on this a bit. It would. I can't think of a reason why the standard would stop at property lines.
okay.
So I think you can ensure that's prior to construction that standard is adjusted, or the design is adjusted, or we can make sure that one way or another that 8 feet is preserved.
Okay. Yeah, I'll obviously ask the applicant about that, but it does affect the size and type of screening, in that first long run of driveway. Okay.
Thank you. Excellent point. Are there any other questions at this stage?
This is Tracy Grambois. I had a question about whether it was desired to be able to see from the street and why there wasn't, I went there today and looked, and it seems like if I lived in that neighborhood, I would prefer to have kind of a fence across the driveway so you couldn't see in there.
There are screening standards for a certain amount of landscaping required between utility use and a street, but it doesn't speak specifically to, say, a gate or something blocking, the view of a building. I invite county staff to speak if it was a design choice or perhaps a security decision to have a little more permeability. Please do educate me on that.
I can speak a little bit to that. So one of the reasons why we wanted some sight lines back into the courtyard area and into the pump station is for security. In speaking with county staff, there was a bit of a concern. We originally had, I think, the western area a bit with higher vegetation landscaping, so that you couldn't really see into the courtyard. And we wanted to actually create a sight line into the courtyard just for security, in case, kids, teenagers go back there. This is kind of somewhat of an easy hideout if you want to drive back into the driveway and into the parking area next to the courtyard. And that was a big reason why we wanted some clear sight lines back towards the courtyard area, and therefore the lower height landscaping.
I did see some cigarette butts back there, so I imagine some kids have already been back there recently.
Yeah, darn teenagers. What can you do?
I've got a question too, kind of around the same topic. Maybe now's a good time to talk about it. On page 59, it's the same page as your materials. The way that the fencing is working with the slats, the 810, for some reason it looks like there's always visible sightline from the street, and even though it's behind the signage, visible sightline into the tank that's in the front of the new building, but right behind the screen. You can see it each time you're looking from the street view back to the building. But there are, in each of the renderings, there's trucks parked in front of it. Can you talk as to, maybe it's a related item that you need to be able to see into that courtyard, even if you can see and it looks like it's some sort of some equipment sitting, maybe it's a big propane tank or something, visible from the road. Can we talk about that for just a minute? Yeah, if that's related from a security point of view.
Robin, would you like me to share my presentation with?
That probably makes sense. Absolutely. Here you go.
You want me to take that question as well, James?
Sure, Andy.
Yeah. So the this is Andy from Jacobs. So the some of the images in here, we've kind of dropped the opacity of the materials a little bit to be able to see through on the renders. You're quite right. You know, with the viewing angles, they're placed pretty close together, and they're quite a wide slat on the fence. So what we wanted to make sure is that as you're walking past or driving past the sites, you do still get those glancing views of the service yard area in its entirety. With it being on a radius as well, that's obviously going to help screen off to the sides a little bit more when you're looking at it straight on from the street. But it really is those just glancing views through it. So as you kind of transition along the street frontage, actually this image kind of shows it pretty well. This is viewing from slightly further to the east of the site. So this is kind of, you know, on our driveway looking, you know, almost directly at these, at the generator building at the gates. So it really depends on the angle that you're viewing this, the service yard area and the fence that's immediately in front of it. Does that answer your question, or is it?
Yeah, it does. It's fairly subjective. It really is. It's a sight line from the street looking back. It's exactly that view you had in the first rendering.
Right.
And I can see the tank in that view. But I think if I'm at the street and if I'm looking at the sign, I think I would be able to see straight into a tank if there wasn't a truck there.
Yeah, because you're pretty much straight on. You know, you're looking kind of parallel with those slats. So as you kind of move along, and then obviously the perspective is it kind of does that, right? So it rotates to close off that view, those sight lines through. So when you are kind of looking straight on, you know, you do see those pieces of equipment, that kind of transitionary views.
Okay, and the only other question that I had, yeah, and I know one of the things I'll say in terms of the statement is, you know, very, very handsome materials, really, you know, very carefully put together. So so hat off on that. Can you? What I don't quite yet understand is from the adjacent property, if that adjacent property, if the neighbor, and I think it's a 2-story house on the other side of the retaining wall, do they have a sight line to the roof of both the old and the new building at the same time? Is there an opportunity for a sight line? And if there is, you know, I can't tell, you know, what the vertical height on this render is. If it's 8 feet.
Looks like that's a grade.
Is what?
Right. No, that looks like it's taken from grade, not from a 2nd-story bedroom or something like that.
That's, yeah, that's what it looks like to me. It's really hard to tell. But just if there is the opportunity or the possibility for sighting from a 2nd story from an adjacent neighbor, is there an opportunity to have the roof colors be more closely matched? Not suggesting complete similarity or complete exact material match, but from the renders it looks like it's a gray, even though it's called out as a bronze color on the standing seam, and then a ballasted type roof in a dark brown. So that was, again, just taking advantage of the design team being here, just wanting to talk through that. Is it a rendering item, and do you think that we'd end up with something that's fairly similar? So if we were to see this from the neighbor, that it would feel more like one consistent presentation of roof materials rather than 2 individual buildings.
Right. So this is Andy from Jacobs again. So that is the intent, is to color match as best as possible and go with more of a matte finish on the roof, so you don't have the the kind of glare aspect from the new metal roof as well. The existing pump station replacement, there's a fairly select range of colors that are available for that type of kind of granular coated roof surface. So the color selection was based off of that material. So looking at what's available for the re-roofing, the recovering, and then matching in those tones to the existing roof that will be recovered and re-insulated. So that is the intent, is to the next kind of step on from this when we get a contractor selected, is to actually look at physical materials and put them side by side and make sure we get those material matches that are complementary to each other. And like you say, with the concern you raised there, is just making sure that we do have that robust palette of materials with these earth tones and making sure that they do kind of match up and they do work well together.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Robin, can I ask you one technical question or code-related question about screening?
Absolutely.
I'm just looking at the code and looking at your summary. I'm seeing and sort of remembering that the screening that's required, the full screen, quote unquote, is that a full screen should block views from adjacent properties, as seen at the pedestrian eye level in all seasons within 3 years of installation. There isn't a section of the code that requires screening between the street and the facility. Is that right?
I believe, and I'm looking it up as well, it's in the table in the landscape and outdoor spaces section. There's a table that has uses and adjacent uses and
right.
The grid. So I'm just looking between utility development and public way. It looks like there's partial screening of 10 feet required.
Okay, so this qualifies as both. That's, I guess, was part of my question. I wasn't sure if it was just commercial institution, utility, or public facility, as opposed to utility development. Because utility development is sort of underground stuff, and I assume transformers and things like that. But this project qualifies for both.
That was the use that most closely matched, and I thought that applied to this, this standard.
Okay, so partial screening from the street is required. Okay, I'm just checking. Okay. Thank you.
Robin, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Is there a signage review as part of the scope related to the monument sign facing the driveway and how it potentially screens the, I'm not sure what the utility box is existing out there, but I remember that came up in our last meeting.
There is. Just bring up my staff report to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. So it was the concern about the height or the size of the sign, or what? So that there is a sign standard to your question. Was there a specific aspect of it that you're concerned about?
I just to me the structures from the street are potentially pushed back far enough that I'm not, they're to be evaluated from this residential neighborhood right of way for what they are, but the signage is what is the first impression, what is the closest to the street, and has a commercial presence to it. And I didn't know if there were particular signage criteria for our consideration related to the sign, or how it was potentially positioned or lit, and how it's positioned to potentially screen the box behind it.
So yeah, you're right. It does, the sign kind of does double duty by screening certain elements that are behind it. But then there's also a standard specifically for non-single family dwelling uses in residential zones, which is what this site would fall under. So it's both an area requirement of 12 square feet and a 42-inch height limit, which this sign falls into.
And my other question is, yeah, thank you. And what is the grade change at the retaining wall to the west? If I've got my directions back correct, between the grade of the buffer area on the other side of the retaining wall and the driveway itself below.
Do you mean the retaining wall that parallels the west property line, or were you referring to the sign as a retaining wall?
No, sorry, the west property line.
Got it. I'm just staring at some topo here. James and company, if you get to it quicker, please feel free to shout out the answer.
Yeah, so this is Andy. I was just looking at the elevation that we cut through there. So it's in the range of 6.5 feet at its highest point in terms of just the levels. So the retaining wall will stand just above that. And then that kind of feathers out, that tapers out down towards the street to a point where it's retaining just a couple of feet of earth. And then when we hit that point where it's no longer required, then that's when we just dress the earth in that area where it's not required.
And the top of that fence above the retaining wall is compliant with code relative to the base elevation at the lower side of that retaining wall? Does it have to comply with residential height?
Well, and off the top of my head, I'm not sure if it's just specifically in the staff report because it's not a design standard, it's a zoning standard, but it will need to comply because it will also need a building permit. So at that stage, if it hasn't been reviewed already, it will need to meet the zoning standard for the residential zone.
Robin, as far as I understand, we have received all comments from the building permit reviewers.
Okay, excellent, good.
Can anyone on the design team side just point out any difference between or any design development that has progressed since the initial study session? In my recollection, which I can't always directly count on, but it feels very similar to how we had originally been presented the project. Not to say one way or the other about it, but were there any changes?
This is Lorcan with the landscape architecture discipline. The biggest change that came out of since the last study session was to coordinate with the neighbor to achieve the expectations and the sort of functioning, effectively screening western edge, critically looking at the density and the size of that material to achieve that basically on day one after installation, to lessen that impact to his view. So from that perspective, that was the biggest change from just the revegetation and the planting design.
And this is Andy for the architecture, and just working hand in hand really with Lorcan and with Mr. Sheldon as well. We adjusted, I think, some of the fence slats rotations on the top wall. There was a certain angle that we were working at to improve screening. So we did a couple of exhibits for discussion with the neighbor to rotate, I think it was 20 to 30 degrees, somewhere in that range, that upper section of the fence line that immediately abuts the building where the roof turn down is. Again, just screening the service yard area from a particular angle that the adjacent neighbour was concerned about. And then that's also complemented by the landscape screen as well.
Do we have any further questions?
I've got a couple more. Robin, I didn't see any letters or communications from the public, either for or against this project. Did I miss anything, or are there none?
You did not. I didn't receive a single written comment on this project.
Okay. I am curious to hear, more from Mr. Sheldon about how he's feeling about this just at the moment. I don't know if we can get him back, but I know he's got questions for us, and I have the same questions, so I'll go to this in just a minute. But anyway, I just was curious about his impressions of where things are. I've got, I guess, a couple of questions for the applicant as well. And one of them has to do with the construction time frame. I may have missed it, but maybe we could go back to it. My understanding, I thought I heard that the construction was going to take 4 years. Did I get that wrong?
No, you didn't.
Okay.
I can, this is James Chaywood Jacobs, the project engineer. So, yeah, so I think this is the slide that you may be referring to. Sorry, am I sharing? No, I'm not.
No.
Sharing.
Yeah, it was the time frame that Meredith shared with us at the beginning.
Yeah.
And the yellow bars seem to be construction. Yeah. And I thought I heard her say,
yeah, so
4 years of actual construction.
Yeah, so this project, so this was for the entire Mercer Enitai Interceptors upgrade project, not just the pump station. So okay. The entire project will take over 4 years to construct, and then punch list, et cetera, will likely spill over into that 5th year.
Okay.
However, North Mercer pump station construction will take, I would say, approximately 3 years. So,
okay.
And likely less than 3 years. We haven't completely firmed up our schedule as we're finalizing design right now, but this duration that we're seeing here is for the entire project.
Okay. So that temporary pump station is going to be in place up against the street in that corner of the property for more than 2 years, maybe closer to 3.
I would say more, probably closer to 2, perhaps less, because the pump station will be needed when the existing pump station goes offline. The existing pump station will not go offline until the new generator building, or a lot of it, is constructed. And during that time, the temporary pump station will also be built out. And then when the switchover is ready to switch flows from the existing pump station to the temporary pump station, that's when it'll become active. But overall, if you're wondering how long the temporary pump station elements will be on site and visible, I would say it's approximately 2 years.
Okay. And the pumps and generators, I think I read that all of those are, or maybe not generators, but the pumps and the noisy parts of that are going to be buried. Is that right? You're going to dig a vault of some sort and get those in there, or maybe I misread that, but.
Yeah, the pumps themselves will be, here, maybe I can.
I'm really just, want to make sure that everyone's clear about, the impact to the neighbor and neighborhood is just understood. From a code perspective, I don't know we have much to say about it other than potentially from a noise perspective, but.
Yeah, so here's a slide that we just have for reference. This is the temporary pump station kind of site layout. The pumps will
Okay.
be inside of this large manhole that will be constructed. Okay, so as you can see here, the pumps are going to be down in the manhole. Okay, there will be some units visible, temporary units visible on the surface, like the control trailer. There's a mobile odor control unit. There's an electrical trailer, temporary generator. All of those will be above grade. These items kind of shaded here in light blue will be below grade.
Is that generator a backup generator, or is that the primary power for the system?
It will be a backup.
Okay. Okay. All right, that covers that piece for me. I guess the area that I'm sort of most curious about and potentially concerned about is that area, you know, between the neighbor's driveway and the project. Specifically where that sanitary sewer is and the planning and the screening and all that stuff that's being proposed there. I guess is there a plan, or have you guys addressed that question of the sanitary sewer being right there in the spot where you want to plant the legacy maples and those sort of taller plants as you at the northerly end of that run of property line, or is that something that hasn't really been addressed yet?
This is James Shea again, project engineer. Turn on my video. All right. So Robin, it's been you know a long time, several months since we looked at some of the sewer clearance issues, and I know that we discussed the clearance from the sewer within the site. I can't really recall regarding this particular sewer, the side sewer that Vice Chair Brandt is referring to. We certainly can and will take a closer look at this, but do you recall if we had looked at this? And maybe Lorcan, you were involved when we were looking at this earlier this year, but
to that location specifically, I also don't recall, but I do know there's been extensive analysis of the on-site sewer lines to ensure those were going to be avoided.
Yeah, and we did go out to site to do some potholing to check out, you know, what is going on down that driveway. And I'm pretty sure, don't hold me to this, but I'm pretty sure that our civil engineering team have reviewed this pretty closely. And like James says, it was probably a few months ago, so we may just refresh ourselves on that. And our civil engineer will be the best person to talk to on that.
And just to chime in, for the purpose of the hearing, there is a recommended condition of approval in the staff report, specifically addressing the issue you raised, Commissioner Brandt, so that it would need to be, details would have to be worked out prior to construction.
That's all understood. I think the salient point for the design commission is that the proposed screening for potentially 50% of that run of fence is not going to be possible. Mm-hmm. Right? The landscape screening, the fence is there, and that's fine, but you might not be able to plant anything more than a bush, you know, along that, and you know, for a long length of that, and that has a tangible impact on the neighbor and the conversations and the agreements that you've set with the neighbor, and that is something that we need to talk about.
This is City Attorney B.O. Park. If I may express my opinion here. I'm not very familiar with the actual plans, but as far as the code citation that the vice chair raised as his concern, as far as the buffers are concerned, the code says that the buffers from pipes from sewer utility, from utilities, and utilities are defined in the code as either public or privately owned utilities. So in a general sense, if we're talking about a side sewer on a property, that side sewer, even if it is owned by a utility, would have a proprietary nature to it, as if, you know, any property owner, a single family home, would own a side sewer. So I believe you know, in my opinion right now is that the buffer requirement is to the main lines that traverse right-of-ways or traverses, you know, a corridor where those utilities are placed, and that's regardless of boundary lines.
Okay, but doesn't that run counter to what Robin's saying about, you know, the requirement that on site they maintain an 8-foot distance from everything, all this?
Pardon me, I was narrowly answering the question. I was not as clear as I could have been. To the question of would a requirement for an 8-foot distance stop at a property line? I think the answer would be no. But if that point is moot because the nature of the utility means it is not addressed by the code, then the standard would not apply.
Yes, what I'm talking about is the applicability of this code section in which type of pipelines and water lines the buffer applies to.
May I ask a kind of a follow-up question to this? You know, a lot of the landscaping that is along this western property line with the Sheldon property was very, very heavily driven and influenced by Mr. Sheldon. As Lorcan, our landscape architect, mentioned, we, you know, increased the density, increased the maturity and the height in response to Mr. Sheldon's request. And this side sewer carries the Sheldon property's wastewater flows. Now, so it is hence his side sewer. If he says he's okay with the proximity of the trees to his side sewer, does that take care of this potential issue? If it is an issue, if it is a code issue, and you know, if Mr. Sheldon says he's fine with it, he'd rather have the density of the trees and the trees where they're located, and he says that's fine if it's closer than 8 feet to his side sewer, does that take care of this issue?
No, I don't believe a property owner has the legal authority to waive a requirement that's established by code.
The code says shall.
Yeah.
Shall not should not. And sorry, I lost you guys all there for a minute. I don't know if that was obvious or not. I didn't get an answer to Bia's question, or to my question.
So yeah, in response to Mr. Che's question is that, you know, I don't believe that a property owner has the legal authority to waive a requirement that's in the code, even if it applies to his side sewer. Now, it is my opinion that his side sewer does not trigger the requirement in this code because the code defines utilities as either public or private utilities, such as PSE, the city of Mercer Island's water and sewer, and you know, etc. You know, because side sewers are of a proprietary nature and it's owned by the property owner, a sewer line that constitute a side sewer would not trigger the requirements in this code for the buffer.
Thank you for clarifying that, Bio. Appreciate it.
So then I guess the question though still remains, once the property owner understands that this is potentially putting his side sewer at risk, and if something happens to it, it's going to be his responsibility, that may change his assessment of this screening. Anyway, you know, and that's, I don't know how far it makes sense for for me at least to go down that path, other than the way I need to sort of assess this project is to assume that there are not going to be trees for 50% of the run of that fence, and that the fence is the primary screening, and I have to decide, you know, whether that's actually, you know, that's meeting the intent of the code or not, right? So I will defer on that until we talk a little bit more about it. I think that is the last of my questions. Thank you.
To piggyback on that, though, that last comment of Vice Chair Brandt, is there an agreement or any obligation to maintain the landscaping, or is there required irrigation, or what are the requirements to ensure that that buffer is maintained, that visual buffer is maintained long term?
James, this is Meredith. Would you like me to kind of do a high-level overview of what we're talking about as far as maintaining the landscaping goes after construction?
Sure.
I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yeah, I said sure. I guess you didn't hear me.
Sorry. So we are still, as we're putting together our contract documents, we are still discussing it, but for 3 years, the contractor will be responsible for maintaining the landscaping. It will then transfer to the county for, and James, please correct me on the duration here, 4 years, and then after that to the city. So it will be maintained as we move through the project and after. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Hi, this is James Che again. So I'd like to, Lorcan, perhaps you can also chime in here. We've got various, I think, different durations of landscape establishment, depending on which area. Mm-hmm. And this area that we're talking about, actually, let me share my screen again. Yeah, so this area, I think for the areas that are within city right away, I think that statement is generally true, Meredith. But this area that I believe Commissioner Czar is talking about, this is obviously not owned by the city, but it is, you know, here's the property line right here. So this would be maintained by the county, you know, as long as the county owns this property and as long as the pump station is functioning.
Absolutely. I'm sorry for that misstep. I was thinking of the project as a whole.
Yeah, but for this area, I forget how long we are requiring for plan establishment, Lorcan.
Well, there's going to be 1 year under warranty, and then the county division who does restoration is taking over, and it's most of this property is within the riparian buffer that requires 5 years of maintenance and monitoring. And the that division, so there'll be irrigation set up, temporary irrigation for 5 years will be run to really provide that additional years of plant establishment, and it'll be maintained along with that riparian buffer actively for 5 years. At that point, it'll be turned over then to King County operations. So it's a 5-year plant establishment period.
And Commissioner Czar, this is B.O. Park again. To the extent that the buffer requirement and the fencing is required under the code or a condition of the permit, the city would have discretion to initiate a code enforcement action if the requirements are not being met by the county. Thank you.
Which gets back to my original point, which is we as a commission have to decide whether the screening is adequate based both on the planting and the fence. Right, I think we'll need to be specific about that, because if we just say it's adequate, we don't call out the fact that the planting is a an essential element of that screening, then the city lacks the teeth, I think, to enforce it, because someone could just say, well, the fence is doing the screening and that's enough.
Forgive my my lack of understanding. I guess what I had heard from the city attorney is that the code in question does not apply to the side sewer, and therefore the landscaping should be considered for whether or not this project complies to the code.
Sorry if I wasn't being clear. Yes, I believe it should, and it does. I think I was back to Suzanne Czar's question about whether there's going to be any kind of, side agreement that guarantees to the neighbor that this stuff is going to be kept in good working order. And it sounds like they're not, right? The only way for us to, make sure that the neighbor is being well served over the long term by this is by just being clear that the landscape is an essential part of that screening and needs to be maintained.
And Commissioner, I think that is, I think, taken care of by both what the county is proposing to establish the plantings, and also, as the city attorney mentioned, if the code standard, which requires landscaping to be maintained in good condition, if that isn't met, then code enforcement would still be an option to ensure that that code standard is met. So both there's enforcement if something is not met, and the county has demonstrated that they're going to do maintenance and monitoring for 5 years to make sure that the plants are established. Is that helping? Are there other questions, or is the commission ready to make a motion?
I feel like we need some discussion.
Yeah, we need some discussion. All right. Have we answered all questions from the commissioners specific before we go into discussion? Once, twice, thrice, done. Let us move on to discussion.
I'll start. Happy to. I think generally speaking, I feel like the architecture and the project as whole is sort of meeting the general intent of the code from what I've seen. I feel like the screening from the street is a question. I do think it's important that it does establish itself as a non-residential use, just so that it is intentionally a bit separate, or obviously subtly separate from somebody turning down a driveway looking for a house or something like that. So I don't have an inherent problem necessarily with the sign. I'm glad there's something blocking that big transformer out there. Does it do the right job? I don't know, but that's I think at least a good intention as far as that move goes. And the fence is, that slat wall fence, I think is a neat idea. I think it's a pretty cool idea. I think if they've worked it out with the neighbor and sort of, what the views are like as he goes up and down that driveway, that's the most important part to me. I don't know that I can argue against needing transparency into the yard. I mean, it's not the first thing I want to see, but it's a pretty narrow driveway. It's a fairly narrow lot. There's not going to be a ton of people kind of staring down and looking at it. So I don't have a huge issue with that. I think for me, is that you guys can tell that the sort of the buffer along that west property line is the big one. Just in my residential practice, I've been told that we can't plant trees on a side sewer that's on a property, within 8 feet. And so that's where a lot of my questioning came from. I like BO's interpretation because it gives us a little more flexibility with the landscape, but I'm not sure I would plant a tree within 8 feet of a side sewer line. I think that's a recipe for disaster for somebody, maybe multiple people. So I do think that in the long run, I really am looking at the screening where that fence is tight to the property line and tight to that side sewer as being affected only by the screening. If we can get the landscape in there and it can hold, great. I'm not saying don't put it in, but I do think a little more communication with the neighbor needs to be had there. And I guess I'm curious to hear what people think. Like, imagine that all that landscape for the first 50 feet wasn't there. Is that fence, is that adequate screening, right? It's supposed to be 20 feet of full screening. And we got, 7 feet and we've got a 6-inch slat metal wall instead, right? And that's the question, I think, for the design commission, at least in that area. There's probably others people have too, but that would be the one that I'd want to hear from people on.
Excuse me, Chair. I just wanted to make sure you were aware that Mr. David Shelton has raised his hand, and it's the chair's discretion if you'd like me to bring him back so that he could speak.
Sorry about that. More people joined and my screen wasn't big enough. I didn't see the person. I'm sorry. There we go. Yes, please. They are allowed to speak.
Takes just a second for him to pop in and out.
Thank you for bringing me back in, and thanks to Vice Chair Brent for having our interests at heart. This is an issue that we've gone around and around with design people on, and the slatted nature of the fence, it sounds like security is the main concern, to have some visuals. But I'm not certain, again, I've raised this issue with the county before as to why a slatted fence is needed along that western boundary of the property. I assume security is enforced by the police or the county's security people who would be traversing the street and onto the county's property, and they would not be traversing our driveway to maintain security. Therefore, I'm not certain why a slatted fence is needed along the western boundary. The growth of trees, of course, is unpredictable, and they're shown from day one as they are, but the screening may suffer at certain times and need to be replaced or so forth and so on. And so we may be falling back to rely upon the fence, as Vice Chair Brandt has stated. And I would really like to see the fence to be a solid fence. It can be the same materials that they're proposing along there. Unrelated to that, just some quick questions on the temporary pump facility, and as to any mitigation measures to screen that facility. 2 years is quite a long time to have it there, and also the lighting of that facility while it's existing. I think that's the only comments that I have. Again, I want to thank everybody.
Okay. Back to the commission. Does anybody wish to build upon Commissioner Brandt's statement, or do you want to yourself continue the conversation, Commissioner Brandt.
I think my only comment would be that there will need to be some fence along the top of that wall for fall protection, right? Just to make sure somebody doesn't fall over that retaining wall and down into the parking area down below. And then certainly so that somebody can't jump over that wall and get into the secured portion of the site. And I think, I imagine the architects would suggest that just having some design continuity between the fence around the yard and that property line makes some sense. And I think it does too. But you know, there'll be perspectives we'll be able to see right through it. And that's, you know, that's again is sort of part of, you know, my hope is that they've worked through that mostly with you already. And it sounds like maybe you have some concerns still, but.
We just lost you.
I'll let other people speak. I'll let other people speak. I'm
Sure,
talking
but
too much.
well, you self muted there for a second. Commissioner McPherson?
Yes, I did.
Thanks. Two notes. We recently had a very expensive side sewer get grown into by trees on our property. So it definitely happens. And I would want to point out that having the fence is obviously necessary, and that we should certainly assume that no arborvitae is perfect, right? So there is definitely the hazardous option that the fence will be the only thing between the two properties. And arborvitae itself is very fast growing. It does need to be kept up. So as to if it's on the property line or who's in charge after the 5 years of trimming that back or keeping that healthy, that's, you know, another consideration of home ownership versus what's being taken care of after the 5 years from the municipal perspective. So just, yeah, not necessarily a question, but comments on trees.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the commissioners have any other comments to make?
Just from personal experience, having walked down that street hundreds of times, you know, I have very little concern about the, you know, visual impact from the street going by there. It's almost an invisible sight. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that same thing. So, I mean, in many ways, I don't have special concerns in that regard.
My only point, well, thank you very much, Soprano. I appreciate that input. You know, my only concern is, and I believe that we talked about the slats and whether there was an option for a perforated type fence or some other sort of way of screening. And what I want to give is the opportunity for the design submitter to talk about it. And I think that we've kind of hypothesized why it's still slats against the western property line. But is it too late to ask them if they can talk about that?
Go right ahead.
I will ask them, please, to talk about that.
Andy, do you want to go ahead and answer this?
Yeah, so I was just finding my unmute button. So this is Andy from Jacobs. We did, you know, it was, you know, generated quite a lot of discussion during the study session that we did a while back. We looked at different options, during the study session. I think we showed some examples of different type of perforations that we were looking at. And we talked about lighting options that would kind of complement that as well, but we kind of discounted, you know, lighting and perforation panels, really because it would draw more attention to the facility. Having something that was simple, you know, the simple vertical slats creates more of a simple, elegant type of enclosure around there, which is still, as Robin mentioned earlier, it avoids that kind of walled compound effect. You kind of run the risk of having large, even perforated fence panels, creating that kind of effect. So we decided to stay with the vertical slats and rotate some of those as well, to create those screening requirements that Mr. Sheldon mentioned there. And it really was just kind of discounted. I think we did a couple of rendered options for those things to look at a while back, and kept coming back to the vertical slat fence.
It makes a lot of sense to me from the street view and the courtyard. With maybe the concern aside now with the sight line into that tank. And I understand, so you're saying as you continue it around the concrete that there is that continuity that you want to maintain. It's a very handsome fence. You say that if I recall correctly, you said it was rotated 22 degrees, and I assume that is to create a, let's see, how do I describe this? 22 degrees. If the slats are perpendicular to the sides of the concrete wall, you're rotating, I would imagine, clockwise 22 degrees. You're creating more of a screen to the neighbor if the vegetation is not there. Is that the correct read?
It is. So the rotated vertical slat section is just that short section up on the top of the retaining wall, which immediately overlooks the service yard area. So we worked out the rotation based on the viewing angle. So I think it was from maybe a dining room window on Mr. Sheldon's property looking out towards the site. So we set the elevation based on I think it was 5 feet above what the LiDAR data told us what the finished floor level was. So we set that in the model looking down towards our building, and then worked out with the rotation that would be required. It was somewhere 20-25 degrees. So you're looking more at the face of the slats, which means that if you can see my camera, you're looking more at it like that rather than like that. So that was the intent behind that. We did a couple of exhibits that we shared, that we did consultation with Mr. Sheldon on, and a couple of different options to see, basically, do we rotate it that way or do we rotate it that way? And, which angle is he more concerned about?
Okay, great. And then Mr. Sheldon seems to be, he's been heavily involved, is what I'm hearing again and again, and that he is satisfied at this particular point.
I believe so.
All right, thank you.
Do I have any other commentary from or questions from commissioners?
This is Commissioner Czar. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I have a setup where I don't know which to unmute, so. I agree with Commissioners Soprano and Perez regarding the setback from the right-of-way. I don't see that as a concern. I think the monument sign also is appropriate, and as long as it's not overlit, which I'm sure the staff will review. I think the other thing to notice in the site plan is that the building is not parallel, or the fence is not parallel with the property line. It starts to peel off of it as it moves towards the south, which I think is also beneficial. It's not like we're talking about it abutted right on the property line. I share the concerns regarding the long-term maintenance of the location of the side sewer, but I think the landscape team will appropriately specify plants with that in mind. So with that being said, I also think it's an interesting fence line and not too commercial. It has an artful nature to it, and and how you move by it. doesn't feel as institutional as other aspects potentially of the building. I was initially more concerned about the vertical siding or the vertical standing seam metal roof. My initial thought was to reverse the slope of the roof line, so the lower portion of the roof line was closer to the property line, but I understand that that's to direct the stormwater into the property and not to the property line itself. So I understand that that serves a function. But anyway, all that being said, I'm personally satisfied with the design presentation and would be ready to have further discussion, of course, but to move past that as well.
I had one more quick question for the applicants, and that is, how tall are the landscape lights, the ones along the driveway? Are they ground lights, or are they up on a pole, or what's the height of those? I can't quite tell from the plans.
Our electrical engineer, unfortunately, is not with us this evening. So I will have to look into that. I'm not sure how tall these are. Griselda, are you still with us? And any idea how tall these yard lights may be?
I'm going to look through an email to see if I can find some cut sheets.
Okay. Yeah. We definitely, we're very intentional in not having too much light pollution onto other properties. So this is, you know, as I think Lorcan mentioned earlier, this I think that's a red dash line. Those are the limits of where the light goes to. So, you know, I don't imagine that these are going to be too tall. But I don't know right now off the top of my head how tall these yard lights are going to be. But definitely was very aware of the need to not put glare onto other properties.
Yeah, I can't find anything readily.
Thanks.
Find the cut sheets for that and then send it along.
Yeah. If there's more questions, I can see if I can dig up the electrical drawings and see if the heights are on there. But I will need a few minutes.
I think at the end of the day that, you know, the important thing is sort of the light spread and its impact on the neighbors, and you've demonstrated that, which generally speaking is, you know, I mean, that's the highest priority thing, I think. You know, we're used to kind of seeing in final applications cut sheets and having all that stuff in place, which is why I asked, because I didn't know if I was missing it or it just wasn't there yet. It sounds like everybody's kind of ready to move forward with a motion. Is there?
Well, that was my next point that I was going to make, but I was trying to make sure people all had their say. And I also wanted, I know you want to say more, but you don't know what else to, no, you're good?
Oh yeah.
You're good. Okay. All right, let's go for it. Once dice. Do we have anybody on the commission that wishes to speak further? Do we have anybody who wishes to speak further? Do we have anybody who wishes to speak further? Okay. The chair will consider motions.
Okay, I will move to approve the application as presented, unless there's a more formal way you want me to say that, Chair Irwin.
That's fine. My only question I would have for you is, do you want to include any of the recommended conditions of approval?
Would you mind reading those out loud? I'm sorry, I don't have those immediately available.
Sure.
If I can
Condition
interject,
one.
oh, pardon me. I did also create a slide with motions, if that helps. Pardon me.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Because
We can
we will probably be editing this evening. Those are the recommended motions. And can we do a 2-for-1 so we can show the recommended conditions?
Yes, momentarily. Pardon me while I bring those up.
No, that's fine.
See, and please give me feedback on whether, gosh, I want to make sure this is convenient for everyone to see. So invite feedback. Is this legible to everyone?
I go up one more notch. I magnify one more on the, yeah, well, not quite, but close. Where we need to give it more space or something. It's just, it's
oh,
just gonna be
Zoom.
fun.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
Not perfect. So, so we sort of have a motion on the floor regarding, I'm assuming, the recommended motion. Is that correct? Commissioner Czar? Okay. Commissioner Czar, can you hear me?
Can you hear me okay?
Now I can, yes.
Yes,
So to
I move
clarify,
to approve.
okay, so you have a motion to approve the recommended motion. Is that correct?
Correct. I move to approve the recommended motion as presented by the staff.
Okay. Does anybody wish to speak for, or, well, let's go back. Let's see. Does anyone wish to, well, let me ask you first, Commissioner Czar. Did you wish to include any of the recommended conditions of approval as part of the recommended motion? I mean, if you don't know what those are, they should be on screen for you to see. And we cannot hear you.
Sorry, if you can hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I can see them.
Okay. Do you wish to include any of the recommended conditions of approval to the motion regarding the recommended motion being brought forward?
I'm reading them, and it looks consistent with our discussion. Unless there's another commissioner that feels otherwise, I'm recommending to include the conditions of approval.
Okay. If anybody wants to change, remove, adjust, we can do that as part of the discussion, pro and con. So right now we have a motion on the floor to accept the recommended motion regarding DSR 19-017 King County Pump Station, including recommended conditions of approval 1 through 5. Does anybody wish to speak against the motion?
I think we might want to clarify 4. I know we had a conversation about planting within the sewer lines.
Okay. Mentally note that item 4 may need some revision. We will do that, but I want to get through where do we need to work? So I'm going to re-ask again. Do we accept the motion as put forward? We have one revision. Do we have any other desires for revision?
The one thing I would ask for consideration with the other commissioners is the addition of the roof material to be consistent per 19.12, you know, consistency of materials, and you know, just the rendering showing differentiation there. So I would have that to be added.
So you want an item 6?
I'm going to request an item 6.
Okay. Would you mind scribbling that up so that and do we have chat open on this?
Unfortunately, no, Chair.
Okay.
And we still need a second for the motion as well.
Okay, fine. Back a step. Do I have a second for the motion as put forward? We will do revisions as we do revisions, but do I have a second for the motion as put forward? If I do not have a second, we have to start the process over.
I second.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a potential revision of
Commissioner Granbois.
Yes, that was me.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a recommended motion. We have recommended conditions of approval. There's a desire to potentially revise recommended condition of approval, item number 4, and a potential for an item number 6 regarding consistency of materials for the roof for the revised facility. So let me do it again. Do we have any other, do we have anybody that wishes to speak against the motion in terms of either being against the motion or wanting to make revisions to the motion? I ask once, twice, 3 times.
I guess I just want to clarify the revision to number 4.
Well, that's going to be part of the discussion because we already have 4 kind of pulled as an item we're going to work on.
I will stand down.
No, that's fine. I expect long discussion on 4. Once, twice, 3 times. Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. It has been seconded. It is including all 5 recommended conditions of approval. There's a desire to potentially revise condition of approval number 4 and the creation of a condition of approval number 6. Let us start with condition of approval number 4. Do we have a means by which we can copy number 4 and put it on a blank page so we can wordsmith it?
You know, I actually think it might make more sense just to create a new one because that's just cut. But that's just cut directly from the code.
Okay, well, I think personally we should take what we have. If nothing else, I would like to have a base from which what we're looking at as we revise versus what the original statement is, just so we have it in front of us. It doesn't have to be these words, but I want us to have a base from which to know that this is where we started from and wherever we end up is wherever we end up. So if we can include the original verbiage for recommendation number 4, and then from there we can start making revisions. I am certain, Commissioner Brandt, that you would love to give us some wonderful words regarding what you would like to have included or not.
Well, you know, it's interesting because at the end of the day, you know, I've got to tie whatever my comments are to code. And but the thing I'm actually most worried about is the neighbor's side sewer, but I don't think that's in my purview as a commissioner to require that the applicant coordinate with the neighbor and make sure that his side sewer is okay, right? That I just don't think I have I don't think I have justification within the code to ask for that to happen. I'm just going to ask for it to happen, but I don't believe it can be a condition of approval. So at the end of the day, then what I'm left with from a code related question is really just wanting to clarify that the landscaping, the health and vitality of the landscaping is equally essential to the screening as the fence itself, and that it needs to be basically maintained, in perpetuity, right? Because it's a code related item.
Okay, so you want to help our typist, Robin, scribble that down? And also, specifically, do you know which portion of code we might want to reference as part of this condition of approval?
Well, sure. First of all, I'd like to make sure everybody else sort of feels, reasonably good about that.
My opinion, for what it's worth, Commissioner Brandt, is that we scribble and then we look and then we assess. I'm trying to minimize judgment as stuff is being written, because for the same reason I want to have the original text in front of us, basis of comparison, basis of assessment. It's easy to say stuff. It's when we actually see it on the printed page that I think people will get a more comfortable idea or have discomfort with whatever is written, so that they get a better idea of what they want.
I'm ready.
Go for it.
Just as a point of clarification, that second shrub is hydrants, not shrubs. Shrubs shall be planted at least 4 feet from hydrants.
And I have
makes sense. I bet we'd really have a complicated life if it was shrubs and shrubs.
I have a clarifying question in regards to the maintenance required as it was presented. Is it a 5-year term requirement, or is it in perpetuity?
So there's a couple sets of standards. The design standards in 1912 simply say all required landscaping shall be maintained in good condition. There's also a critical areas review under review for this property that is looking at mitigation for impacts to the watercourse buffer. And as part of that process, I believe specifically that's where the 5-year maintenance and monitoring, it's a standard, I think it's both a code requirement and practice just to maintain and demonstrate compliance for at least 5 years, just to show that the plants are getting established and providing that ecological function. But it's not a requirement from the design standards.
But just to clarify, the critical the critical areas review is specific to the water course. It wouldn't address the side sewer.
Correct. No.
So the 5-year term is unrelated.
It's unrelated. It's not a standard that comes from design standards, but as there's also a review of critical areas and impacts to critical areas happening for this property, landscaping is being maintained for 5 years. So I guess it's not triggered by the design review. It's something that is also happening on this property. I don't know if I'm helping.
It sounds like you're saying it's on the property holistically, not specific to the water course.
Correct. It was the requirement for 5-year maintenance and monitoring was it's triggered by the presence of the water course because the impacts to the water course buffer had to be evaluated. So it is related to the water course, but since the entire property is water course buffer, all of the plantings on the property are subject to that 5-year maintenance and monitoring.
It's not limited to a mitigation area.
In this case, the mitigation area is the entire property. So it.
Okay, thank you. That helps. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, Commissioner Grambois.
I had a clarifying question. I believe I heard the city attorney say that the 8 feet requirement from the sewer line was not a requirement for the county. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, to the extent that, yes, it does apply to the county. My opinion is to what qualifies as a water and sewer pipeline under the code. But it doesn't have to do with whether this is a county project or a private project or a city project. It's not the nature of the applicant, but the nature of the type of pipeline that my comment related to.
So the statement as it stands, trees shall be planted at least 8 feet from water and sewer pipelines, is still correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to further clarify, it's correct, but it may not apply to the side sewer.
Because the side sewer would not be classified as a sewer
Considered.
pipeline.
Yes, that's my point. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Robin, I'm ready to take a run at it if you are. Okay, and I'm going out of the code analysis that you did. It's page 12 of 18. So here we go. In order to adjust the specific standard of section 19.12.040, capital B, the number 7, lowercase a, the Design Commission finds that both the fencing as proposed and a healthy and dense and vital landscape screen are equally essential.
Did you mean to say adjust, Vice Chair Brandt? I don't understand.
Yes, because the code reads that a 20-foot deep full screen is necessary between a residential property and a commercial, industrial, utility, or public facility. And so we are adjusting that code. Now the code is a should code, it's not a shall code, right? So we are adjusting what it is that the code is saying is the standard. We have the right to do that. And so I just want to make sure that it's clear that the conditions of our being willing to adjust it are that the landscaping and the health of the landscaping and the fence as proposed are equally important. And if that, what I just said doesn't really say that, let me know. And Robin, I'm assuming that adjust the standard is the proper terminology. It's what you use in your section, so I'm assuming that describes what it is that we're doing.
I think it captures that, yes, this is a case where we're meeting the objectives and the intent of the standard instead of the specific standard, because if there's a landscape screen and a fence, that's an equal or better alternative. So I think that language is fine. I think that captures that idea.
Okay. Does anybody wish to make any further comments regarding the revised condition of approval number 4? Asking twice, asking thrice. This is a revised condition of approval number 4. Commissioner Czar, are you okay with accepting the revised condition of approval number 4 as part of a revised motion? Commissioner Czar, I am not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry.
That's fine.
you need me to reiterate.
I just want,
reiterate
I want you to tell me whether or not you can accept this revised condition of approval as part of the motion that's on the floor.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I accept it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Perez, please tell me you have a completely written up that is just goldenly grammatical revised condition of approval number 6.
Did you say the word golden? My question.
I'll take titanium or silver. I might even take brass,
Okay.
although that's outre these days.
This should be simple. I think it's pretty direct. But so here's what I'm going to suggest for consideration. And I'm sorry, I just lost it here. So per section 19.12.030 section 4B, as something along the lines of let me say this. Per that section, the Design Commission again, I'm going to ask for the staff to assist, but I would say along the lines, recommends or requires, I know there's complications with both of those, requires the consistency and continuity of design materials, and I would add the word visual consistency and continuity of design materials extends to the roofs as under consideration for all sides of a building per the code. Does that make sense? So I can say that again.
Let me see here.
Consistency and materials extends to the
yeah, extend, not extends. And to the roofs, do we want to be more specific and say to the roofs of the entire facility, the roofs of the 2 buildings? Do we need to go that far?
Requires the consistency and continuity of the design materials extend to the roofs of both buildings as for all sides, as code consideration, under code consideration for all sides of the building.
May I offer a thought?
Yes, please.
Would it work to simply name the type of material or a color, or because I recall there being discussion around one of the bronzy materials. Does it make sense to just name that and say that must be used for the generator building roof?
I'm not comfortable going that far. I don't know how the rest of the commission feels.
I don't think so, because we haven't seen a physical sample. We don't want to require that. I think
So it was talking about the consistency of the color scheme or
visual consistency, right?
Visual consistency, yes.
Commissioner Perez, I think the way it's written, it's restricting consistency just for the new building, even by adding both buildings. I think, is there a way to write it so that they are consistent with each other? Maybe even say, let's see, you had under construction, would that account for the restoration of the existing, or should that be more explicit? There's under construction, to me sounds more like new construction, but I think you're also referencing back to the restoration of the existing, correct?
That is correct. So Commissioner Czar, are you, I think under consideration for both restoration and new construction and all sides of the building. Could we add that under consideration for new construction and restoration for all sides of the buildings, I would imagine at that point. And I'm not sure, for me, maybe the word, it's a little confusing, restoration for, but as one side of the, basically just asking for the roof to be considered as one of the all sides of the building. I don't know quite how to wordsmith that yet.
Could you put a period after restoration and then just have a new sentence, something to the effect of roof is considered one of the sides of the building, something to that effect?
Yes. I think in particular in this case. Are you comfortable with this? I mean, are we setting a precedent saying that roofs are now part of the consideration of a building? I don't think that's typically the case, but it's mostly because of the sight line and just preserving visual continuity on behalf of the neighbor.
I think that's right.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't think we need the last sentence, but it's.
It might make sense to say, just like what you said, Commissioner Perez, because of the sight line in this particular situation, comma, roofs are considered a side of the building.
So making it just specific to this one project. Okay.
Yeah.
Pardon me, Commissioner Groundbach, could you repeat the verbiage you just used?
Because of the particular sight lines of this project, comma, roofs are considered a side of the building.
Yeah, I'm not sure we want to set the precedent that the design commission thinks that roofs go on the side of a building. That would be bad.
Even though in this case, actually,
they do.
But I think it's a good point.
No, I think we're doing the right thing. I'm getting a little fat happy, maybe.
Low blood sugar.
Yes, dinner time.
Too much, or does this get at what you're?
Sight lines of this specific project, roofs will be considered a side of the building. I don't think the last for this project is necessary. I mean, you can keep it in, but it's
just to
or maybe it is understood that this includes the portion of the roof that's turned down towards the neighbor. This, I mean, side of building means
you don't want to go down that road in writing, because that'll make this will get worse. I would suggest that either particular or specific probably doesn't need to be included.
Okay.
Let's just strike this whole thing.
The entire sentence?
Yep. That'd be my vote. Don't do it yet, Robin, but I think we're making it more complicated than it needs to be.
Well, it's a habit.
That's true.
Yeah.
As someone, just unsolicited opinion, but we'll have to ensure consistency with this condition at building permit. I think the second sentence adds that specificity and helps preserve the design commission's intent in a way that's very helpful.
So you're recommending keeping the last sentence?
I think it's helpful. It immediately means, oh, okay. That's why we are
okay.
Then let's just say, it is noted that this condition, applies because of the particular sight lines of this project, and leave it at that.
This condition applies?
This particular condition, or this condition, yeah. Yeah, because of the particular sight lines. Yeah.
Okay.
From neighboring properties. Project, or of this project, and then we're covered.
That's weird.
Neighboring properties for this project, or okay, that's better.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. if we do not see a need for further revision of new condition of approval number 6, Commissioner Czar, do you accept this being included as an additional modification to the existing motion?
I do. It's golden.
Okay. There you go. All right. We have a motion on the floor to accept the recommended motion and the recommended conditions of approval with a revised condition of approval number 4, which I will read. And trees shall be planted at least 8 feet from water and sewer pipelines, and shrubs shall be planted at least 4 feet from hydrants in order to adjust the specific standard of section 19.12.040 subsection B subsection 7 subsection A. The Design Commission finds that both the fencing as proposed and a healthy, dense, and vital landscape screen are equally essential, and including new condition of approval number 6, reading now, per section 19.12.030 subsection B subsection 4, the Design Commission requires the visual consistency and continuity of design materials extend to the roofs of both buildings as under consideration for new construction and restoration. It is noted that this condition applies because of the particular sight lines of this project from neighboring properties. We have a motion. We have a second. Those in favor of the motion, I will read off your names and I will ask for your vote.
Excuse me, Chair. I see that
Yes.
Commissioner Grandbois has her hand raised. I just wanted to make sure it was an old hand.
I apologize. I didn't lower it. I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Vice Chair Brandt?
I approve.
Commissioner Gamboa?
Approve.
Commissioner McPherson?
Approve.
Commissioner Perez?
Approved.
Commissioner Soprano?
I approve.
Commissioner Czar?
Approved.
Chair Irwin also approves. Motion passes.
Thank you to the applicants. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
No worries. Okay, we now move to other business. I would like to welcome Jeff Thomas as our interim CPD director to give a director's report.
Okay.
There you go.
Can you see and hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, good evening, Design Commission. I'm Jeff Thomas. Been the interim community and planning services director here for about a month, a little more than a month now. And this is obviously the first Design Commission meeting that we've had since I've been on board. For those of you that may not know, and it may be quite a few of you, this is actually my second tour of service at Mercer Island. I actually worked at Mercer Island back in the mid-2000s for a couple years. And I don't believe there were any design commissioners that are currently appointed that were serving back then. I think there is one current planning commissioner that was on the design commission back then, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, it's been good to see some familiar faces at a City Hall, or at least on Zoom and Microsoft Teams here in the last several weeks, as a number of members of the department and city staff are still with the city after all this time. But anyway, some of you may be a little bit curious. My appointment is on an interim basis at this moment, which means that starting in January, the city manager will be after unsuccessfully completing a recruitment for a permanent director back in the summer, decided to go the interim route, and there will be, what I understand, will likely be a quarterly review of the situation, given changing circumstances with COVID and other economic factors to seek out a permanent incumbent for the position. So a little bit about me. I've been a director of community development for a little over 10 years now for a few different jurisdictions. And as I mentioned earlier, I've worked at Mercer Island previously, not as the director, but as a principal planner, position that we no longer, or at least currently, don't have on the books at the city. But did some work with the Design Commission a little bit while I was with the city the first time, certainly with the Planning Commission and with the City Council. So it's good to be back. And fortunately, my first day of work back there at the end of September, my parking spot was available when I arrived at City Hall to check in with human resources and IT and so forth. So that was a big relief. But anyway, I'll look forward to sitting in on these meetings and participating when the opportunity presents itself. And you seem like a good group that works well together, and a smoothly run meeting for all intents and purposes. So congratulations to that, and be happy to answer any questions you have at this late hour in the evening, or be happy to always take an email or a phone call should you wish to check in with me at some point, and be happy to discuss or try and answer anything that may be on your mind. Thank you.
Aboard.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe we intend to have our next meeting on December 8th. Do we have any upcoming commissioner absences to report at this time? I do not see any. Okay.
December 8th is a Tuesday, is that correct?
I have no idea. Let's go find out.
The 9th, I believe, December 9th.
Yes.
The meeting or the
9th is Wednesday.
9th is Wednesday.
Correct.
So the one on the 18th of November has been canceled?
I ran out of time before the meeting started to send the cancellation out for the meeting on the 18th. The applicants didn't get stuff in time for us to hold that meeting. So November 18th is being canceled. And we just wanted to get a kind of quick temperature check if people think that they'll be available for the December 9th meeting.
December 9th. As far as I know, yes, but health issues with certain members of my family may change that, but so far, no. Okay. Announcements and communications. Do we have anything to report on that front?
I just wanted to welcome Commissioner Grambois to the commission. This is her first meeting with us after Commissioner Sanderson resigned this summer. So welcome, we're glad to have you here.
Welcome to the group.
Thank you.
Okay, so can we get any details regarding the next meeting that's due to happen starting in December?
Guess I'll pipe up, Jeff. Pardon me if I don't mean to overtalk, but is it okay to share? The Mercer Park building, which is the former Farmers Insurance building, is doing just some exterior modifications, painting, doing some new landscaping that may be ready to go by December 9th. Still figuring that out, but that would be the next thing that would be ready to go.
Okay. Do we know if that will include the work on the roof, or is this just the basics?
It would be the same scope that you saw at your study session this past summer. So exterior facade, plaza, and rooftop, like green roof and deck. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I know that's where we had a fair bit of conversation last time. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Could I, sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
Or Chair Irwin, maybe I can ask of Robin. I've heard other scopes, I think in the planning group regarding that same piece of property is at this point, that's not part of our consideration. Is that right?
Correct. I think I've heard indirectly there may be future plans for the site, but no permits have come in. Nothing's been applied for. All I know about so far is the scope of work you've seen already.
Okay, good. Thank you.
There is a potential. The owners of the building have made noises about possibly taking a portion of the parking lot and creating townhouses on the spot that they select. I have no idea if that's actually going to happen. I know about it only because I live close enough to the site that they sent letters out to everybody that lived within a certain radius of the site to let them know where things stand at this point in time. Interestingly enough, they never talked about the siding or the entrance or the roof, but they did talk about this possibility of building additional townhouse units. If there are no other comments, queries, concerns, the next Design Commission meeting will be December 9th, 2020 at 7 p.m. There being no other business to come before the Design Commission, the time is now 9:29 p.m. Pacific time, and the meeting is adjourned. However, as a reminder to the commissioners, please stay seated until the city staff has terminated the Zoom broadcast. Good evening, stay safe, stay healthy.
Thanks, everybody.